Mike, yesterday, from your mention, about 200 of your listeners had their routers exposed.
That's a high number.
I looked at the number before.
It's a much
after.
higher percentage than from the Security Now crowd.
Oh, yes. And it's not surprising. But, so it means that this is useful to your listenership.
But what's problematic is I don't know what turning off UPnP isn't necessarily a fix, right, or not?
We do know that, as you said earlier, there are some routers where if you disable it in the user interface, it remains exposed on the WAN side.
Right. Can you name names? Can you name brand names and stuff, or is it?
I just haven't even been bothering.
There's too many of them. Yeah.
My feeling is that since any exposure is bad, I don't want to give anyone a sense of like, oh well, I'm exposed, but I've got one of the safe routers.
Right.
It's like there's no such thing as an exposed safe router.
Right.
It's a service, and we're up to 22 different IPs that I am seeing now wandering around the internet looking for them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I have a 64 IP.
So you're also monitoring people who are looking for these.
Yep, I have a 64 IP network that is just like no traffic, never used. It's my honeypot, and I started monitoring it when this all happened and collecting the IPs, unique IPs that are looking, and we're up to 22 different IPs.
Wow.
So it's not just a theoretical, oh, well, maybe someday people will start looking. No, they're looking now.
Leo Laporte, the tech guy. Steve Gibson is our computer security guru. He hosts a podcast on my Twit network called Security Now. And he came up with such a severe, scary... We've had him on from time to time, but only when there's something really awful out there. This one may be the worst thing I've ever heard of. And the problem is, and I mentioned this before, you're not going to see coverage of it in mainstream media because it's just too geeky. Steve, welcome.
Hey, Leo. Great to be with you.
I call him the explainer-in-chief because he's good at explaining this stuff, but this is a challenge even for you, Steve, to explain.
Well, the short version is there is a means for devices in our home or small office, the Soho, to talk to each other and also to reach out onto the public internet and request access to what's on the public internet. That was denied when we all started using these NAT routers to have multiple computers in our homes.
It used to be you'd put your computer right on the internet directly. But
exactly.
as people wanted to share their internet access, they started getting routers.
Right. And one of the benefits is the sort of a built-in benefit of a router is it's a firewall. Any traffic that is trying to get to your network from the outside that isn't traffic you initiated from the inside by like asking for something on a website, for example, the router just ignores it. It throws it away. It blocks it. It hits the wall, and that's it. So that's been a real benefit that people have had, and we're relying on that. What was discovered a couple weeks ago by a security researcher who deliberately scanned the entire internet, all 4.3 billion IP addresses that we have now, looking for a theoretical vulnerability.
They did this for 6 months, too. It wasn't a...
Yes.
They really took their time doing it.
Yes, from last July through the middle of November of 2012, they did a complete analysis of the exposure, and they were stunned themselves by how many routers they found. 81 million regular people routers are vulnerable. What's happened is due to a mistake that was made in the software, which most of the routers all got from the same place. They've identified like 4 sets of software, all the various router manufacturers, about 1,600 different manufacturers, started with the same software. So they all sort of have the same mistake for the same reason. And that mistake is that what should only be exposed for use inside the network is being exposed for use on the public internet, which is what these security researchers found. This is the 81 million number they came up with. And what it means in practical terms is that when malicious hackers find those same 81 million routers, they're able to talk to the router in a way that only the owner, the private owner, is supposed to, and essentially open it up and gain access to people's interior private networks.
Can they then do damage? I mean, what can they do once they're in?
Well, this is why it's expected to be very highly exploited, is they can have a field day. Everyone's late model televisions are on their network, and their entertainment systems, and their cameras, and webcams, and all their computers, and this is, we're all networked now at home with increasing levels of connectivity. All of that is available to hackers through this universal plug-and-play, as it's called, this UPnP exploit.
Now, it's unfortunately many thousands of router brands. It's from hundreds of different manufacturers. Such a long list that I can't give the list of safe routers or unsafe routers. Steve has set up a test, though, that you can use at grc.com. He's had this test for a long time, Shields Up.
Yes, I even made it easier to get to as a consequence of this. Just grc.com/shields-up. And that URL will take you directly into the system. You don't have to go. And I can assure you,
this is safe. This isn't going to do anything. And when you press the proceed button, you'll see a big button that says, "Okay, go ahead and test my router." It says GRC's Instant UPnP Exposure Test. Press that yellow button, and what you hope for is a green response that says this equipment did not respond to our probes. That means that your router does not have that flaw. But Steve, as you've recorded on here, over 1,200 routers who have tried this test have had that flaw. What should they be doing?
Well, this is one of the big problems, is that we haven't really yet seen a response from the router manufacturers. And in fact, many people have old routers that are no longer being maintained by the manufacturers. This is truly a danger. The first thing you can try to do is to turn this off, because routers come with it turned on, this UPnP turned on.
And we've spoken about this. You should always have it off. There's really, it's a security flaw anyway.
So if you knew you should have had it off, but you never bothered to turn it off, now is definitely a good time
you
to do
that in the router settings, and you'll have to look at your manual to find out how to do that. But generally, you do it through a browser on your computer.
Right. We have seen some instances, some reports of people turning it off and it not going off. So you'll want to test again with GRC's test after you believe it's off. Probably that will solve the problem. That is, turning it off because it's normally on, turn it off, and as long as GRC's test shows green, as you said.
Hang on, Steve. We're out of time. We'll get back to you in a second. Leo Laporte, the tech guy. And so the couple of questions that people tempting. What's the website?
It's I made a bit.ly link, bit.ly/PDP-8, all lowercase.
Hang on, here we go. So since we started talking a few minutes ago, Steve Gibson and I, about this problem with routers, many thousands of router manufacturers, many router models, many hundreds of manufacturers, many millions of machines. Quite a few people have done the test at grc.com/shields-up. Since we started talking, 14 people have found that they are vulnerable to this.
Yeah.
So those of you who find you're vulnerable to this, you should immediately go into your router settings, turn off UPnP, test again, and hope that you're not still vulnerable.
Yeah, I have found I'm also monitoring the internet. I have a large block of unused IPs. So when scanners are scanning the internet, I will see packets coming into those IPs just as a part of the scan. And I've so far I've identified 22 different remote anonymous somebodies who are probing for this vulnerability in routers.
So these are bad guys looking for vulnerable routers so they can hack them.
Well, there are probably a couple good guys. I believe that the original.
That's a good point.
I think the original Rapid 7 guys, H.D. Moore and company, who did the test, I think they're still scanning. Okay. And I've identified their IP, but still that leaves 22 or 21 others unaccounted for. So it's
how
not
are we overstating the risks? What can happen if you don't fix this?
Well, no one wants to have their network exposed to the outside world.
Can they see my data?
It would absolutely be like somebody you didn't trust being on your home network.
So anything you're sharing, for instance, internally would be visible. They could use perhaps your printer, your cameras,
also, network shared servers. NAS
your NAS
boxes,
servers. They'd be visible.
Yes, and they often support universal plug and play so that they can be easily configured.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, you need to think about. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Steve's at grc.com. The test is grc.com/shields_up. Encourage you to do it and tell your friends. Take action if you come up positive. That means turn off UPnP in your router. You should do that anyway. Yeah. It's not a good thing to have.
Thanks for spreading the word, Leo.
grc.com. And everybody should watch or listen to, you get your choice, the last episode of Security Now, where we go into this in great detail. And every Wednesday, Steve and I talk security at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern at twit.tv. So if you're a real hardcore security nerd, this is the show for you. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Leo.